Imagine this. Tonight, before you go to sleep, turn off every light in your home. Turn off your phone. Close the curtains. Switch off the television. Remove every source of artificial light. Then sit quietly. First, nothing feels unusual. You know where you are. You know your house. You know there is no danger hiding in the next room. Yet, if you remain in darkness long enough, something strange begins to happen. Your hearing becomes sharper. Small sounds become important. A distant creak, the movement of air, the settling of furniture. Your attention shifts. You become alert, not because you chose to, but because something ancient inside your brain has awakened. Most people assume fear of darkness is learned. They think children fear the dark because of scary stories. Monsters, ghosts, movies, nightmares. But what if that isn't true? What if fear of darkness is much older than civilization itself? What if it existed before stories, before language, before history? What if the fear you feel when the lights go out has been traveling through human blood for hundreds of thousands of years? To answer that question, we need to go back, far beyond the first cities, far beyond the pyramids, far beyond agriculture, back to a time when every sunset transformed the world. A time when darkness meant uncertainty, and uncertainty often meant death. The first modern humans appeared roughly 300,000 years ago. They lived in a world completely unlike our own. There were no roads, no houses, no hospitals, no police, no locked doors, no safe places illuminated by electric light. Only nature, endless landscapes stretching toward the horizon. Grasslands, forests, rivers, mountains, and predators. Many predators, creatures that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of hunting. Humans were not at the top of the food chain. Not yet. In fact, if you were transported back to prehistoric Africa, you would probably be surprised by how vulnerable humans really were. We tend to imagine our ancestors as fearless warriors, but reality was much different. Compared to lions, humans were weak. Compared to leopards, humans were slow. Compared to hyenas, humans lacked powerful jaws. Compared to many animals, humans had terrible night vision. We possessed one great advantage: our intelligence. But intelligence could not make darkness disappear. And every evening, the sun reminded humanity of this fact. As daylight faded, the rules changed. The creatures that dominated the daytime began retreating. The creatures that ruled the night began emerging. For predators, sunset was not the end of activity. It was the beginning. Lions often hunt during the evening and nighttime hours. Leopards are masters of stealth after dark. Hyenas can travel vast distances beneath the cover of night. For them, darkness was an ally. For humans, darkness was a challenge. Imagine standing alone on an African plain 100,000 years ago. The sun has just disappeared. The temperature begins to drop. The sky glows orange for a few moments, then purple, then black. You hear insects. You hear distant animal calls. You hear movement somewhere in the grass. You cannot identify it. You cannot see it. And that is the problem. Humans fear what they cannot see, not because we are irrational, but because our ancestors learned that unseen threats were often the deadliest. If a lion stands 20 feet away in broad daylight, you can react. You can run. You can climb. You can call for help. But if that same lion is hidden in darkness, your options disappear. The danger becomes unpredictable, and the human brain hates unpredictability. Even today, uncertainty creates anxiety. Waiting for medical results, waiting for an important phone call, waiting for news. The unknown is often more frightening than the known. Darkness is uncertainty in its purest form. When visibility disappears, imagination takes over. Your brain begins asking questions. What was that sound? Did something move? Am I alone? Could there be danger nearby? These questions were useful for survival. The humans who asked them tended to live longer. The humans who ignored them often did not. Over countless generations, evolution rewarded caution. It rewarded alertness. It rewarded fear. This might sound strange. We often think of fear as a weakness, but fear is one of the greatest survival tools ever created. Without fear, your ancestors would not have survived long enough to have children. Without fear, humanity might never have existed. Fear keeps living creatures alive. A gazelle fears the lion. A rabbit fears the fox. A bird fears the hawk. And humans feared the darkness, because darkness concealed the things that wanted to kill them. One evening, long before recorded history, a small human group gathered beside a rocky outcrop. The day had been difficult. Food was scarce. The adults were tired. Children sat close to their parents. Everyone understood the importance of staying together. In prehistoric environments, isolation was dangerous. Groups provided protection. More eyes, more ears, more chances to detect danger. The larger the group, the better the odds of survival. As darkness settled across the landscape, conversations became quieter. People listened. The night was speaking, not with words, but with sounds. A distant growl, an animal call, movement through dry grass. Every sound carried information, and every sound had to be interpreted correctly. Imagine hearing branches snap somewhere beyond your vision. Your brain immediately begins searching for answers. Was it the wind? A grazing animal? Predator? The problem is that your brain cannot tolerate uncertainty for long. When information is missing, it fills the gaps. Sometimes accurately, sometimes not. This tendency is still with us. Look at a shadowy room. Your brain may briefly imagine shapes that are not there. Hear a strange sound at night. Your brain may imagine causes that do not exist. This is not a flaw. It is a feature. Your ancestors survived because their brains preferred false alarms over missed threats. Consider two prehistoric humans. One hears movement in the darkness and assumes it is harmless. The other hears the same movement and assumes danger. Most of the time, the cautious individual is wrong, but occasionally the cautious individual is right. And on those rare occasions, being right means survival. Natural selection strongly favors that outcome. Over thousands of generations, humans became experts at detecting possible threats, even imaginary ones. This is why darkness often feels uncomfortable. The darkness itself is not dangerous. What matters is what darkness prevents us from knowing. The absence of information creates opportunity for fear, and fear fills the void. As night deepened, ancient humans faced another challenge. Sleep. Every animal needs rest, but sleeping creates vulnerability. A sleeping human cannot monitor danger effectively. A sleeping human cannot react quickly. This created a difficult problem for our ancestors. How could they rest while remaining safe? The answer was cooperation. Groups developed systems. Some individuals remained awake while others slept. People slept close together. Shelters were chosen carefully. Safety became a collective effort. Even then, danger remained. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans were sometimes preyed upon by large carnivores. Marks found on ancient bones reveal encounters that did not end well. The prehistoric world was not a peaceful place. It was beautiful, but it was also brutal. Every creature was trying to survive, and survival often came at the expense of something else. For early humans, darkness amplified every risk. The inability to see transformed ordinary environments into landscapes of uncertainty. A familiar area during daylight could become completely different at night. Paths vanished. Landmarks disappeared. Distances became difficult to judge. The world itself seemed to change. This transformation left a deep impression on the human mind, an impression that remains with us today, because despite all our technology, part of our brain still interprets darkness through ancient instincts. The logical part of your mind knows your bedroom is safe. But another part of your brain operates according to rules written long before modern civilization. Rules shaped by countless generations who survived because they remained cautious after sunset. And something remarkable was about to happen. Humanity was approaching one of the most important discoveries in its entire history. A discovery that would push back against the darkness. A discovery that would allow humans to survive where they once struggled. A discovery so powerful that it would eventually help our species spread across the planet. That discovery was fire. But before fire became humanity's greatest ally, there was a time when the night belonged entirely to the darkness. And it was during those long prehistoric nights that one of humanity's oldest fears was born. For hundreds of thousands of years, the setting sun marked the beginning of humanity's most vulnerable hours. Every evening followed the same pattern. The daylight slowly retreated. Shadows stretched across the landscape. Colors faded from the world. And uncertainty arrived. To modern people, sunset is often beautiful. It signals relaxation, rest, the end of work. But to many of our ancestors, sunset was a warning. The clock was ticking. Whatever needed to be done had to be finished soon. Water needed to be collected. Food needed to be gathered. Children needed to stay close. Safe locations needed to be found. Because once darkness arrived, mistakes became much more costly. Imagine being part of a small group living nearly 150,000 years ago. You wake before sunrise. The air is cool. The world is quiet. Soon the day begins. Hours are spent searching for food. Perhaps berries are gathered. Roots are dug from the earth. Small animals are hunted. The group travels many miles. Energy is constantly being spent. Every day is a struggle against hunger. Yet throughout all these activities, there is one thing every member of the group is aware of. The sun is moving, and eventually it will disappear. Unlike modern humans, early people could not separate themselves from nature. They lived inside it. Every weather change mattered. Every season mattered. Every environmental shift mattered. And nothing mattered more than the transition from day to night. Scientists often describe humans as visual creatures. Much of our understanding of reality comes through our eyes. Vision is our primary sense. We depend on it more than most people realize. Close your eyes for 10 seconds. Immediately, your confidence decreases. Your awareness changes. You become more cautious. You move more slowly. That reaction exists for a reason. Your brain prefers information. Vision provides enormous amounts of information every second. Remove it, and uncertainty increases dramatically. Now imagine losing that information every night for your entire life. This was the reality for countless generations of humans. Darkness transformed confident movement into cautious movement. It transformed certainty into doubt. It transformed familiar places into mysterious places. And because humans are storytelling creatures, something fascinating began happening. When people could not explain something, they imagined explanations. Long before written myths existed, the seeds of mythology were already growing. A strange sound in darkness, a shadow moving unexpectedly, an unexplained disappearance. Human minds searched for answers. The unknown became populated with possibilities. Some possibilities were real, others were not, yet both could trigger fear. This tendency remains deeply embedded within us. Even today, people often feel uncomfortable walking through dark spaces alone. An empty hallway, a quiet basement, a dark forest path. Most people understand logically that nothing is wrong. Yet emotionally, something feels different. Their attention sharpens. Their awareness increases. The ancient systems of the brain quietly activate. Those systems evolved for a world where darkness often concealed genuine threats. The remarkable thing is that these instincts developed long before humans understood why they existed. Evolution does not require understanding. It only requires survival. Imagine a child living 80,000 years ago. The child has never studied biology, never studied psychology, never heard the word evolution, yet the child fears darkness. Not because anyone explained predators, not because anyone described genetics, but because countless generations before that child survived by taking darkness seriously. The child inherited more than eye color, more than height, more than facial features. The child inherited instincts, and among those instincts was caution toward the unknown. As evening settles across the prehistoric landscape, the group becomes quieter. Adults listen carefully. Children stay close. Every sound matters. The wind moving through grass. Birds suddenly becoming silent. Distant animal calls. All of these details carry information. Information can mean survival. One of the most important skills our ancestors developed was learning to interpret these signals. Nature is constantly communicating. Animals react to danger. Birds change their behavior. Prey animals become alert. Experienced humans learned to notice these patterns. But darkness made this much harder. Visual clues disappeared. Information became incomplete. And incomplete information creates anxiety. Psychologists today understand something our ancestors learned through experience. The human brain dislikes uncertainty far more than certainty. People can often cope with bad news better than unknown news, because certainty allows preparation. Uncertainty does not. Darkness is uncertainty made physical. It hides information, conceals reality, prevents prediction. And because prediction is essential for survival, the brain responds by increasing vigilance. This response was useful in prehistoric environments. The problem is that evolution moves slowly. Civilization transformed our world in only a few thousand years. Electricity transformed it even faster. But the human brain still carries ancient programming. A few hundred years of electric light cannot erase hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary experience. That is why darkness continues to feel different. Your rational mind understands that modern darkness is usually harmless. Yet deeper systems inside the brain continue operating according to ancient rules. Rules that once saved lives. Consider how many predators hunted humans throughout prehistory. Lions, leopards, hyenas, crocodiles, large snakes. Each represented a different danger. Each required different survival strategies. But many shared one important advantage. They were far better equipped for darkness than humans. Cats possess reflective layers behind their eyes that improve night vision. Many predators have superior hearing.
Superior smell. Superior stealth.
Humans lacked these advantages. Instead, humans developed cooperation, communication, intelligence, and eventually technology. But before these advantages reached their full potential, humans endured countless generations as vulnerable creatures. This reality shaped the human nervous system. It shaped our instincts. It shaped our fears. The darkness became associated with risk, not because darkness itself was harmful, but because darkness reduced awareness, and reduced awareness often increased danger. One evening, somewhere in prehistoric Africa, a group of humans settled near a rocky shelter. The day had been productive. Food had been found. Water had been secured. Children were safe. Yet nobody relaxed completely. Night was approaching. As the final sunlight disappeared, the group gathered closer together. The youngest members remained near their parents. Older individuals scanned the surroundings. The landscape slowly vanished into darkness. Beyond the limits of sight, the wilderness remained active. Predators moved. Animals hunted. Life continued, but humans could no longer observe much of it. Imagine hearing movement somewhere nearby, not close enough to identify, not loud enough to understand, just movement. Your mind immediately begins constructing possibilities. This is one of the brain's most extraordinary abilities. Creates models of reality. When information is missing, it fills gaps, sometimes accurately, sometimes inaccurately, yet from an evolutionary perspective, overestimating danger was often safer than underestimating it. A false alarm costs little. A missed predator can cost everything. This simple imbalance influenced human evolution for thousands of generations. The result is a species uniquely sensitive to hidden threats. A species capable of imagining dangers before they appear. A species whose greatest survival tool became anticipation. But anticipation has a side effect: fear. And nowhere was that fear stronger than in darkness. Because darkness represented the ultimate hidden threat. You could not see it. You could not measure it. You could not fully understand it. You could only imagine what might be waiting beyond the edge of your vision. And sometimes imagination was enough to keep you alive. As the prehistoric night grows deeper, humanity stands on the edge of a discovery that will change everything. A discovery that will allow humans to create islands of safety inside an ocean of darkness. A discovery that will alter the balance of power between humans and predators. A discovery so important that some historians consider it one of the greatest turning points in the history of our species. But before that discovery arrives, we must spend one more night in the world our ancestors knew. A world where darkness still ruled. The night was never silent. That is one of the greatest misconceptions modern people have about the ancient world. When we imagine prehistoric darkness, we often imagine stillness. A quiet landscape sleeping beneath the stars. But the reality was very different. The night was alive, everywhere. Insects chirped from hidden places. Predators moved through tall grass. Birds called to one another across great distances. Small animals searched for food. Branches cracked. Leaves rustled. Water flowed through rivers and streams. The darkness concealed much of this activity, but it did not stop it. In fact, many creatures became more active after sunset. To our ancestors, night was not the absence of life. It was the beginning of another world. A world that humans could hear but not fully see. And that made it frightening. Imagine lying awake beneath the stars 100,000 years ago. The rest of your group is sleeping nearby. The fire has not yet been discovered. There is no protective wall, no locked door, no shelter illuminated by electric light, only darkness. Above you stretches an endless sky filled with stars. Around you stretches an endless landscape hidden in shadow. You hear something move. Your eyes open immediately. Your heart beats faster. You listen carefully. The sound comes again. Then it stops. You wait. Nothing. For several minutes, there is silence. Then another sound emerges from a different direction. Perhaps it is harmless. Perhaps not. You have no way of knowing. This uncertainty is exactly what made darkness so powerful. Humans are remarkably good at dealing with visible threats. A charging animal, an approaching storm, falling tree. When danger can be seen, action becomes possible. But invisible danger creates a different experience. The brain enters a state of heightened alertness. Every possibility must be considered. Every sound becomes meaningful. Every sensation becomes important. This is why darkness affects people differently than daylight. Darkness forces the brain to rely on incomplete information. And incomplete information encourages imagination. Modern neuroscience has shown that the brain is not simply a machine that records reality, predicts reality. Every moment of your life, your brain is constructing expectations about the world around you. Constantly asks questions. What happens next? What caused that sound? What is hiding behind that object? Most of the time, these predictions are accurate. But in darkness, prediction becomes much harder. There is less information available. The brain compensates by generating possibilities. And because survival is the priority, many of those possibilities involve danger. This tendency did not appear by accident. It was shaped by natural selection. Imagine two individuals living 50,000 years ago. Both hear movement in nearby grass. The first individual assumes it is harmless. The second individual assumes it may be dangerous. Most nights, nothing happens. The cautious individual experiences unnecessary fear. The careless individual sleeps peacefully. But one night, the movement belongs to a predator. Now the outcome changes dramatically. The cautious individual wakes others. The group becomes alert. Protective action is taken. Survival becomes more likely. The careless individual receives no second chance. Across thousands of generations, evolution repeatedly rewarded vigilance. The result is the human brain we possess today. A brain that sometimes worries too much. A brain that occasionally imagines threats that do not exist. A brain that still becomes uneasy in darkness. From an evolutionary perspective, this system worked. False alarms were acceptable. Missed threats were not. As the hours passed, ancient humans learned to recognize certain sounds. Some sounds meant safety, others meant danger. A distant herd animal moving across the landscape might not be concerning, but sudden silence could be. Nature often becomes quiet when predators are nearby. Experienced humans learned these patterns. They learned when to relax and when to pay attention. Knowledge became a survival tool. Parents passed observations to children. Children grew into adults. Generations accumulated experience. Yet no amount of experience could eliminate uncertainty entirely. The darkness always retained an element of mystery. Beyond the limits of vision, anything seemed possible. This mystery left a permanent mark on human psychology. Even today, people often report seeing shapes in darkness, faces in shadows, figures standing where nothing exists, movements that vanish upon closer inspection. This phenomenon is not evidence of supernatural forces. It is evidence of a brain optimized for survival. Humans evolved to recognize patterns quickly, especially patterns involving living creatures. If something vaguely resembles a face, your brain notices. If something resembles a human figure, your attention immediately shifts toward it. The cost of being wrong is small. The benefit of being right can be enormous. Therefore, the brain prefers caution. This same system that once protected our ancestors continues operating in modern environments. A coat hanging in a dark room becomes a person for a brief moment. A shadow appears to move. An object looks unfamiliar. The brain reacts before conscious thought catches up. These reactions are ancient, far older than civilization, far older than language, far older than history itself. And nowhere were they more important than during humanity's earliest nights. As darkness deepened, another challenge emerged. Children. Every human society throughout history has had children. And children experience the world differently than adults. They possess less knowledge, less experience, less understanding of risk. Yet remarkably, fear of darkness appears early in human development. Across cultures, across continents, across different historical periods, children often show caution toward darkness even when they have never been exposed to frightening stories. Why? Part of the answer may lie in evolution. For young children, staying close to caregivers dramatically increases survival chances. Darkness naturally encourages proximity. A child wandering away at night faces greater danger than a child remaining near adults. Fear becomes protective. Fear encourages behavior that increases survival. In this sense, fear is not the enemy. It is a guide, a signal, a warning system created through countless generations of natural selection. As the stars move across the prehistoric sky, the human group remains together. Some sleep, others remain awake. The darkness surrounds them on all sides. Yet, despite the danger, something remarkable is beginning to happen. Humans are learning, observing, adapting. Each generation becomes slightly better at surviving than the one before. They study animal behavior. They learn migration routes. They recognize seasonal patterns. They understand the landscape. Knowledge accumulates, slowly, patiently, over thousands of years. And eventually, this accumulation of knowledge leads humanity toward one of the greatest discoveries in history. But before that discovery arrives, there is one more truth about darkness we must understand. The fear of darkness was never really about darkness. Darkness itself cannot hunt. Darkness cannot bite. Darkness cannot attack. What humans feared was something much deeper. They feared the loss of certainty, the inability to know, the possibility that danger might exist beyond perception. And this fear remains with us today, even in brightly lit cities, even in modern homes, even in a world transformed by technology, because the human brain was shaped in a different world, a world where every sunset carried risk, a world where survival depended upon respecting the unknown, a world where the darkness often won. But humanity was changing, slowly at first, almost invisibly. A new force was about to enter the story, a force that would push back against the night itself. For the first time in history, humans would discover a way to create daylight after sunset. And when that happened, everything would change. The balance between humans and darkness would never be the same again. Long before humans learned to control fire, they occasionally witnessed it. Lightning would strike dry grass. A distant tree would erupt into flames. Entire sections of wilderness could burn beneath an angry sky. To early humans, these events must have seemed almost supernatural. One moment darkness dominated the landscape. The next, brilliant light appeared where none had existed before. Fire was terrifying, but it was also fascinating. Unlike any other force in nature, fire changed everything around it, transformed cold into warmth, darkness into visibility, danger into opportunity. At first, humans could only observe it from a distance. The flames moved unpredictably. They consumed plants. They frightened animals. They produced heat intense enough to injure anyone who approached too closely. Yet they also created something humanity desperately needed, light. For perhaps hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived entirely according to the schedule of the sun. When daylight disappeared, activity slowed dramatically. Night imposed limitations. Travel became dangerous. Observation became difficult. Predators gained advantages. But fire offered something extraordinary, the possibility of extending the day. Imagine the first human group that managed to preserve a natural fire. Not create one, simply keep one alive. A lightning strike ignites dry vegetation. The flames spread. Eventually the fire weakens. Glowing embers remain. Most animals stay away. Humans do not. Curiosity draws them closer. They notice something remarkable. Predators seem reluctant to approach. The area feels safer, warmer, brighter. For the first time, humans possess a small island of light surrounded by darkness. Everything beyond the fire remains uncertain, but within its glow, visibility returns. Faces become recognizable. Movements become visible. Threats become easier to detect. The psychological impact must have been enormous. For countless generations, darkness had represented vulnerability. Now humans possessed a tool capable of pushing that vulnerability back. Only a little at first, a few feet, then a few more, but enough to matter, enough to change survival. Picture a small group gathered around flickering flames. The night remains vast. The wilderness remains dangerous. Yet something has changed. The people can now see one another. They can communicate more easily. They can remain active after sunset. They can watch the darkness rather than being swallowed by it. For the first time in history, humans have gained an advantage over the night. Scientists believe fire may have transformed human evolution in ways we are still discovering. It provided warmth during cold periods. It allowed food to be cooked. It improved safety. It encouraged social interaction. And perhaps most importantly, it created a gathering place, a center, a shared focus. As flames danced against the darkness, people sat together. Stories emerged. Experiences were shared. Knowledge passed between generations. The fire became more than a tool. It became a social revolution. Yet something interesting happened. Fire reduced fear, but it did not eliminate it. Because beyond the edge of the light, darkness still waited. In fact, the contrast between firelight and darkness may have made the darkness feel even more mysterious. The fire illuminated a small circle. Outside that circle stretched endless uncertainty. Anything could be hiding there. Predator, a rival group, an unknown threat. Humans found themselves staring into darkness more than ever before. Watching, listening, wondering, and as they watched, their imaginations became active. Look into a campfire long enough and the mind begins to wander. The flames move constantly. Shadows dance. Shapes appear and disappear. The brain searches for patterns. Stories naturally emerge. Perhaps this is one reason humans became such powerful storytellers. Around fires, people discussed events, explained dangers, shared lessons, preserved memories. The darkness beyond the fire became a canvas for imagination. Children listened carefully. Adults recalled experiences. Warnings were repeated. Legends began forming. Over generations, these stories accumulated. Some were accurate, some exaggerated, some entirely fictional, but all served a purpose. They helped humans navigate uncertainty. And uncertainty was exactly what darkness represented. One night, a child might hear a strange sound from beyond the campfire. The child asks what caused it. An adult provides an explanation. Sometimes the explanation is correct. Sometimes it is not. Yet the story remains. Years later, that child becomes a parent and repeats the same story. This process may have played a role in the birth of myths across the world. Because humans dislike unanswered questions. When information is unavailable, stories often fill the gap. Darkness created many unanswered questions. What moved beyond sight? What made certain sounds? What happened to those who disappeared? Why did danger seem greater at night? Long before science existed, humans searched for answers. And where certainty was impossible, imagination stepped in. As centuries passed, fear of darkness evolved. It was no longer only about predators. It became connected to mystery itself. The unknown, the unseen, the unexplained. This transformation can still be observed today. Most people are not afraid that a lion is hiding in their hallway. Yet many still feel uncomfortable in complete darkness. Why? Because the emotional system responsible for fear evolved long before modern realities. It responds to uncertainty more than logic. When visibility disappears, ancient instincts awaken. Those instincts do not ask whether electricity exists. They do not consider security systems. They do not analyze modern statistics. They react according to rules shaped in prehistoric environments. Rules that helped our ancestors survive. Around the campfire, these instincts remained active. Humans felt safer, but never completely safe. The fire reduced risk. It did not remove it. Predators could still approach. Storms could still occur. Accidents could still happen. And perhaps most importantly, the darkness remained, waiting patiently beyond the light. Imagine staring beyond a prehistoric campfire. The flames illuminate faces. Voices can be heard. The immediate surroundings are visible, but a short distance away, everything disappears into blackness. You cannot see beyond it. You cannot know what exists there. You can only wonder. This experience shaped the human mind more deeply than most people realize. Because every night, for thousands upon thousands of years, humans confronted the same reality. A small circle of knowledge surrounded by a vast ocean of uncertainty. The fire represented what was known. The darkness represented what was unknown, and humans have always been fascinated by the unknown. It attracts us, frightens us, challenges us. That fascination eventually drove exploration, science, discovery, civilization itself. But it also created fear, and nowhere was that fear stronger than during the long nights of prehistory. As generations passed, humans became increasingly skilled at controlling fire. Its benefits expanded, survival improved, confidence grew, yet something unexpected happened. The predators were no longer the only source of fear. Human imagination had begun creating new dangers. Dangers that existed not in the wilderness, but inside the mind itself. And that would become the next chapter in humanity's relationship with darkness. The human mind is a remarkable machine. It can imagine things that do not exist, can travel into the future, can reconstruct the past. It can create entire worlds from nothing more than thought. This ability helped humans become the dominant species on Earth. But it also created a new problem. Once humans learned to imagine possibilities, darkness became more than a physical challenge. It became a psychological one. A lion hiding in tall grass is dangerous, but a lion that might be hiding in tall grass can be even more frightening, because possibility has no limits. The imagination can create threats larger than reality itself. This is one reason darkness affects humans so deeply. Darkness removes information. The imagination rushes to fill the void. Around ancient campfires, this process happened every night. A strange sound emerged from beyond the light. Someone wondered what caused it. Another person suggested an explanation. A story was born. Most stories disappeared. Some survived. The most memorable stories spread through groups and generations. Slowly, humanity developed a new relationship with darkness. The darkness was no longer merely where predators lived. It became the home of mysteries, of unanswered questions, of things beyond understanding. And once that transformation occurred, fear became much more complicated. Imagine a group gathered around a fire 40,000 years ago. The flames crackle softly. Children sit close to their parents. The stars shine above. Beyond the firelight lies complete darkness. One of the children hears a distant sound. Immediately, a question appears. What was that? Nobody knows. Perhaps it was an animal. Perhaps the wind. Perhaps something else. The uncertainty creates tension.
Humans naturali sa explanations.
The brain dislikes unfinished questions. Even today, unresolved mysteries attract enormous attention. People become fascinated by disappearances, ancient civilizations,
Unsolved crime.
strange events. The attraction comes from the same source. The human mind craves certainty. Darkness denied certainty, and so the imagination went to work. Over thousands of years, different cultures developed different stories about the night. Some imagined spirits, others imagined monsters, others imagined supernatural beings. The details changed. The pattern remained the same. The unknown acquired a face, a name, a story. From a psychological perspective, this makes perfect sense. Humans understand threats more easily when those threats have identities. An invisible danger is difficult to process. A named danger is easier to discuss, easier to remember, easier to teach children about. As a result, darkness became filled with characters, creatures of the night, guardians of forests, shadowy figures, ancient spirits. Legends spread from generation to generation. Many of these stories had practical purposes. A parent might tell a frightening tale to discourage children from wandering away after sunset. The lesson increased safety. The story survived. Over time, fear and storytelling became closely connected. Yet beneath every legend lay the same ancient reality. Darkness limited information, and limited information increased risk. Even when supernatural explanations appeared, the original evolutionary problem remained unchanged. Humans could not see clearly at night. Predators still existed. Danger still existed. Uncertainty still existed. The stories changed. The biology did not. This connection between biology and imagination remains visible today. Think about horror movies. Very few horror scenes occur in bright daylight. Most happen at night, in dark buildings, in abandoned hallways, in forests after sunset. Filmmakers understand something instinctively. Darkness amplifies fear, not because darkness itself is frightening, but because darkness removes information. The audience cannot fully see what is happening. Their imagination begins working. The brain fills gaps. Tension rises. Exactly the same psychological process that helped our ancestors survive. Modern entertainment often exploits systems that evolved in prehistoric environments. The fear feels contemporary. Its roots are ancient, thousands of generations ancient. But darkness influenced humanity in another surprising way. It changed how people slept. Many modern people assume sleep has always occurred in the same manner. Yet historical evidence suggests that humans may once have slept differently. Before artificial lighting became common, many people followed natural cycles more closely. Night was longer. Darkness lasted for extended periods. Sleep patterns often reflected this reality. For early humans, nighttime rest was essential. Yet sleeping carried obvious risks. A sleeping individual is vulnerable. Awareness decreases. Reaction times slow. Defenses weaken. This created an evolutionary challenge. How could humans obtain enough rest while remaining safe? Part of the answer involved groups. Humans are social creatures. One reason social behavior evolved so strongly may be that groups improve survival. More eyes, more ears, more protection. While some individuals slept, others remained alert. Responsibility was shared. The group became stronger than any individual. This strategy proved remarkably successful. Humans spread across continents, adapted to different climates, survived environmental changes, and eventually became the most influential species on the planet. Yet despite these achievements, darkness retained its power, not because humans failed to overcome it, but because darkness remained linked to something fundamental, the unknown. And humans have never completely conquered the unknown. Even in the modern world, there are still unanswered questions, still mysteries, still uncertainties. The human brain responds to them much as it always has, with curiosity, with caution, sometimes with fear. This response once protected our ancestors from predators. Now it helps us navigate complex modern challenges. The environment changed. The mechanism remained. As the fire burns lower, imagine a prehistoric family settling down for the night. The youngest children are already asleep. Adults speak quietly. The stars will slowly overhead. The wilderness stretches endlessly into darkness. Beyond sight, animals continue their nightly activities. Life and death unfold unseen. Yet within the circle of firelight, humans remain together, sharing warmth, sharing stories, sharing knowledge. The fire cannot eliminate darkness, but it can push it back. And perhaps that is one reason fire became so important symbolically. It represented more than warmth, more than survival. It represented certainty, knowledge, awareness, the ability to see. And humans have always been drawn toward those things. For every step humanity took toward understanding, darkness represented what remained unexplored. The unknown horizon, the unanswered question, the mystery waiting beyond perception. Over thousands of years, humans gradually expanded their control over the world. Better tools appeared, better shelters appeared, more advanced societies emerged. Yet even as civilization advanced, something curious happened. The fear never completely disappeared. It adapted. A person living in a modern apartment may still feel uneasy walking through a dark room. A child may still request a night light. An adult may still experience discomfort in complete darkness. The circumstances changed. The emotional response remained, because the response was never really about modern dangers. It was about ancient survival, ancient memories written into biology, ancient lessons repeated across countless generations, lessons learned beneath star-filled skies long before recorded history began. And those lessons continue influencing human behavior today. But there is an even deeper reason darkness affects us. A reason hidden inside the structure of the human brain itself. To understand it, we must look not at the world around our ancestors, but at the machinery inside their heads. Because the greatest battle between humans and darkness was never fought in the wilderness. It was fought inside the mind. Inside every human brain lies a structure older than civilization, older than agriculture, older than cities, older than written language, a structure so ancient that versions of it existed long before modern humans appeared. This structure does not care about your career. It does not care about your social status. It does not care about your plans for tomorrow. Its primary concern is much simpler. Stay alive. Everything else comes second. Deep within the brain is a collection of systems designed to detect danger. Long before conscious thought begins, these systems are already working. Scanning, evaluating, predicting, preparing. Most of the time, they operate quietly in the background. You rarely notice them, but darkness changes things. Darkness removes information, and whenever information decreases, these ancient systems become more active. Imagine walking through your home during the daytime. You move confidently. You know where everything is. You rarely think about each step. Now imagine walking through the same space during a complete power outage. Immediately, your behavior changes. You move more slowly, more carefully. You extend your hands. You become aware of obstacles. The environment has not changed. Only visibility has changed, yet your brain reacts as though the level of risk has increased. Because from an evolutionary perspective, reduced visibility often did mean increased risk. For hundreds of thousands of years, the inability to see clearly was a genuine survival problem. The brain adapted accordingly. Modern neuroscience has revealed something fascinating. The brain is constantly making predictions about the future. Every second of every day, it attempts to anticipate what will happen next. This ability allows humans to navigate complex environments efficiently. But prediction requires information. The less information available, the less accurate predictions become. Darkness dramatically reduces information. As a result, uncertainty rises. And when uncertainty rises, alertness rises with it. This relationship may explain why darkness feels different from other environmental conditions. A rainy day reduces comfort. A cold day reduces comfort. But darkness often produces something more powerful. Vigilance. The brain begins searching for threats. Not because danger is necessarily present, but because danger could be present. The distinction is important. Evolution favored organisms capable of responding to possible threats before those threats became visible. Waiting for certainty was often too risky. Consider an ancestor walking through a forest at dusk. Visibility is poor. Shadows stretch between trees. A sudden movement appears at the edge of vision. The brain must decide quickly. Ignore it or investigate. The cautious response may waste energy. The careless response may cost a life. Over thousands of generations, natural selection repeatedly rewarded caution. The result is a nervous system highly sensitive to uncertainty. A nervous system that remains active today. This ancient sensitivity influences countless aspects of modern life. People often feel more comfortable with lights on. Many sleep better when they know their surroundings are visible. Children frequently prefer a small light during the night. These behaviors are surprisingly widespread across cultures. Although the details vary, the underlying pattern remains remarkably consistent. Humans generally prefer visibility. Visibility creates certainty. Certainty creates security. Darkness reduces certainty, and reduced certainty activates ancient survival mechanisms. Yet darkness affects the brain in another way as well, a way that may be even more important. When visual information decreases, the brain begins paying greater attention to other senses. Sounds become more noticeable. Touch becomes more important. Small environmental changes receive greater attention. This heightened awareness once provided survival advantages. A distant predator might be detected through sound before becoming visible. A subtle environmental change might signal approaching danger. The brain learned to listen carefully when sight could not be trusted. This is why ordinary sounds often seem louder at night. The sounds themselves may not have changed. Your attention has changed. The brain allocates resources differently in darkness. Awareness shifts. Focus narrows. Potential threats receive priority. These responses developed in a world where nighttime survival required constant vigilance. Even though that world largely disappeared, the underlying systems remain. Perhaps nowhere is this more obvious than when people find themselves completely alone in darkness. Many individuals who feel comfortable during daylight report increased anxiety under these conditions. A dark forest, an empty building, a deserted road at night. The environment may be objectively safe, yet discomfort emerges. The emotional brain responds before logic has an opportunity to intervene. Because the emotional brain was shaped by evolutionary pressures that lasted far longer than modern civilization has existed. In evolutionary terms, electric lighting is incredibly recent. Cities are recent. Modern security is recent. The ancient survival systems of the brain are not. They were refined over hundreds of thousands of years, and they continue operating according to rules established long ago. Rules created in a world where darkness genuinely increased danger. As the generations passed, these systems helped humanity survive extraordinary challenges. Ice ages, droughts, predators, environmental disasters, migration across unfamiliar continents. Again and again, cautious individuals gained advantages. Again and again, vigilance improved survival. Again and again, the human brain became better at detecting possible threats. Yet every adaptation carries trade-offs. The same imagination that helped our ancestors anticipate danger also created new forms of fear. The same predictive abilities that improved survival could sometimes produce false alarms. The same sensitivity that detected predators could occasionally misinterpret harmless events. This brings us to one of the strangest experiences associated with darkness. An experience so common that millions of people have reported it throughout history. Seeing things that are not really there. Not because people are imagining wildly. Not because they are irrational. But because the brain is attempting to solve a difficult problem. When information is incomplete, the brain generates possibilities. A shadow resembles a figure. A shape resembles a face. A movement seems to occur where nothing moved. These experiences reveal something profound about human perception. We do not simply see reality. We interpret it. The brain constantly combines incoming information with expectations. Most of the time, this process works extremely well. In darkness, however, the lack of information creates opportunities for error, and those errors often involve threats, because the brain evolved to prioritize survival over accuracy. From an evolutionary perspective, mistaking a shadow for a predator is preferable to mistaking a predator for a shadow. One error causes embarrassment, the other can cause death. Natural selection favored the safer mistake. Generation after generation, century after century, millennium after millennium, until the tendency became part of human nature itself. The remarkable thing is that these ancient adaptations continue influencing people who have never faced the dangers that created them. a child sleeping in a secure home, an adult living in a modern city, a traveler staying in a hotel. The circumstances differ dramatically from prehistoric life, yet the emotional systems remain recognizable. The darkness still whispers the same ancient message. Be careful, pay attention, something unseen may be nearby. For our ancestors, that message often carried life-saving value. Today, it usually does not, yet the message remains. A relic from a world where uncertainty could be deadly. A world that shaped humanity more profoundly than most people realize. And as we continue exploring the origins of fear, we will discover something surprising. The darkness did not merely influence how humans survived. It influenced how humans dreamed, how humans imagined, how humans created gods, spirits, monsters, and entire belief systems. Because once darkness entered the human mind, it began changing far more than behavior. It began changing culture itself. Long before humanity built temples, wrote books, or developed science, people looked into the darkness and wondered what existed beyond it. This question may seem simple, but it shaped the course of human history, because whenever humans encounter something they cannot fully understand, they search for explanations. And for most of our existence, darkness was one of the greatest mysteries imaginable. Today we understand many things our ancestors did not. We know why the sun rises. We know why storms occur. We know what causes disease. We know what lies beyond the clouds. But for countless generations, these answers did not exist. The world was filled with uncertainty, and uncertainty creates stories. Imagine sitting beside a fire 30,000 years ago. The flames dance against the darkness. The stars stretch endlessly overhead. Children listen quietly while older members of the group speak. Perhaps someone tells a story about a strange encounter in the wilderness, a figure seen briefly in the darkness, a sound that seemed impossible to explain, a person who vanished during the night and never returned. The details may change with each retelling. The mystery grows. The story survives. This process occurred everywhere humans lived. Different continents, different climates, different cultures. Yet remarkably, many ancient stories share similar themes. Creatures emerge after sunset. Spirits travel through darkness. Danger hides beyond the edge of the firelight. The similarities are unlikely to be accidental. All humans faced the same fundamental challenge. Night reduced certainty, and the human imagination responded. The darkness became populated with possibilities. Some possibilities were real, others existed only in stories, but the emotional response was often identical. Fear, curiosity, wonder. These emotions became deeply connected to the night. Even now, thousands of years later, traces of those connections remain. Think about the language people use when describing darkness. The unknown, the unseen, the hidden, the mysterious. Darkness became a symbol for uncertainty itself, a metaphor that appears in cultures around the world. When people describe entering an uncertain period of life, they often speak of darkness. When they describe gaining understanding, they speak of light. This symbolism did not emerge randomly. It reflects ancient experiences. For our ancestors, light genuinely increased knowledge. Darkness genuinely reduced it. The connection became deeply embedded within human thought. Over time, the darkness acquired another meaning. It became associated with imagination. Because when visual information disappears, the mind begins creating its own images. This phenomenon remains surprisingly powerful. Many people have experienced moments when darkness seemed to transform ordinary surroundings. A familiar room feels different at night. An ordinary hallway appears unsettling. A harmless object resembles something else entirely. The environment has not changed. Perception has. The brain is working harder to interpret incomplete information. And when information is limited, imagination becomes more active. Scientists sometimes refer to this process as pattern detection. Humans evolved to recognize patterns rapidly, especially patterns involving living things, faces, eyes, movement. These abilities helped our ancestors survive. Detecting a hidden predator even a few seconds earlier could mean the difference between life and death. As a result, the human brain became extraordinarily sensitive, sometimes too sensitive. It often prefers detecting patterns that do not exist over missing patterns that do. This tendency helps explain why people occasionally see faces in clouds, figures in shadows, shapes in darkness. The brain is searching continuously, looking for meaning, looking for information, looking for danger. For prehistoric humans, this constant search was essential. Night after night, generation after generation, people scanned the darkness, watching, listening, waiting. Their survival depended upon it. But there was another consequence. The darkness became a place where imagination flourished. And imagination is one of humanity's greatest strengths. The same ability that creates fear also creates innovation. The same ability that imagines threats also imagines solutions. The same mind that wonders what might be hiding in darkness eventually wonders what might exist beyond mountains, beyond oceans, beyond the stars. In many ways, humanity's greatest achievements emerged from the same curiosity that made darkness so fascinating. The unknown frightened us, but it also attracted us. That attraction pushed explorers into unfamiliar lands, scientists into unanswered questions, inventors toward impossible ideas. The darkness represented uncertainty. Humans responded by seeking understanding. Yet despite all our progress, the emotional power of darkness never disappeared completely. Even in modern cities, many people prefer sleeping with some source of light nearby. A lamp, a hallway light, a glowing clock, a television screen. These habits vary from person to person, but they reveal something important. The ancient relationship between humans and darkness remains active. Part of the brain still values visibility, still values awareness, still values certainty, because for most of human history, those things mattered enormously. As the centuries passed, civilizations grew larger. Technology improved. Knowledge expanded. Humans learned to create fire at will. Then candles, then oil lamps, then gas lighting, eventually electricity. Each innovation pushed darkness farther away. Streetlights illuminated roads. Homes remained bright after sunset. Entire cities glowed through the night. For the first time in history, vast numbers of people could live without experiencing true darkness. And yet something unexpected happened. The fear did not disappear. Instead, it adapted. Dark forests remained unsettling. Abandoned buildings remained unsettling. Power outages remained unsettling. Complete darkness still triggered ancient instincts, because those instincts had been shaped over hundreds of thousands of years, far longer than any technological solution had existed. This is one of the most important ideas in understanding human fear. Technology can change environments rapidly. Evolution changes minds slowly. The modern world transformed in a few generations. The human brain did not. Deep inside us remain systems designed for a prehistoric world. Systems that once protected vulnerable humans from predators. Systems that encouraged caution. Systems that treated uncertainty as a potential threat. These systems continue functioning today. Most of the time, we barely notice them. But when darkness falls, their presence becomes easier to recognize. A slight increase in alertness, a subtle awareness of sounds, a feeling that the world has somehow changed. These sensations are echoes from humanity's distant past, echoes carried across thousands of generations, messages from ancestors who survived because they paid attention when the sun disappeared. And yet there is one aspect of darkness even more mysterious than fear itself. an experience so strange that people throughout history have struggled to explain it. An experience that occurs not while we are awake, but while we sleep, because once darkness surrounds us and consciousness begins to fade, the human mind enters another world entirely, the world of dreams, and that world may reveal even more about why darkness has always held such power over us. Every human who has ever lived has shared one extraordinary experience. No matter where they were born, no matter what language they spoke, no matter what they believed, eventually night arrived, and eventually they closed their eyes. Then something remarkable happened. The world disappeared, yet the mind remained active. Dreams began. For ancient humans, dreams were among the greatest mysteries of existence. Imagine living 50,000 years ago. You spend the day hunting, gathering food.
Avoiding danger.
You fall asleep beneath the stars. Then suddenly you are somewhere else. Perhaps you are speaking with a person who died years ago. Perhaps you are running through landscapes that do not exist. Perhaps you are flying, falling, fighting, exploring. Everything feels real. Then you wake up. The fire is still burning. The stars remain overhead, and confusion follows. What exactly happened? Even today, despite modern neuroscience, dreams remain partly mysterious. Scientists understand much more than our ancestors did. Yet many questions remain unanswered. Why do we dream? Why do certain dreams feel so vivid? Why do nightmares occur? Why does the sleeping brain create entire realities? For prehistoric humans, these questions must have been overwhelming. Unlike darkness itself, dreams did not simply hide reality. They appeared to create new realities. A person could encounter someone who was far away, a dead relative, an impossible creature, an event that never happened. To ancient minds, these experiences may have seemed completely real. After all, there was no scientific framework available to explain them. The result was profound. Dreams likely influenced some of humanity's earliest beliefs about existence. Because once people began asking what happened during sleep, they inevitably began asking larger questions. Questions about life, questions about death, questions about consciousness itself. And all of these questions emerged from the darkness. The connection between darkness and dreams is deeper than most people realize. Throughout most of human history, darkness signaled the transition into another state of awareness. The daytime world belonged to ordinary experience. The nighttime world belonged to uncertainty, mystery, imagination, dreams. As evening arrived, reality became less predictable, not only outside the mind, inside it as well. Imagine a prehistoric child hearing stories around a campfire. Stories of hunters, stories of ancestors, stories of strange encounters. Eventually, the child falls asleep. That night, those stories may return in dreams. The line between reality and imagination becomes blurred. The emotional impact can be enormous. A frightening dream feels real while it is happening. The heart races. Fear appears. The body responds. Even after waking, traces of that fear remain. This experience is universal. Modern people still wake from nightmares with pounding hearts. The rational mind knows the danger was imaginary. The emotional systems react as though it was real. This reveals something important about the human brain. The brain does not always distinguish sharply between imagined threats and real threats. Emotion responds to both. And for our ancestors, this made dreams incredibly significant. Dreams could influence decisions, behaviors, beliefs, entire cultural traditions. Over thousands of years, darkness became associated not only with external uncertainty but with internal uncertainty as well. What happens when we sleep? Where does the mind go? Why do nightmares exist? These questions fascinated humanity for millennia, and nightmares themselves may have roots connected to ancient survival. Consider the experiences most commonly associated with fear: being chased, being trapped, falling, being attacked. Many nightmares involve exactly these themes connected directly to survival. Some researchers believe dreams may help the brain rehearse responses to threats. The idea remains debated, but it raises an intriguing possibility. What if some nightmares originated as evolutionary training exercises? What if the sleeping brain was practicing for dangers that might occur while awake? If true, darkness influenced human survival in an even deeper way than previously imagined, not only by creating external threats, but by shaping internal preparation for those threats. Whether or not this theory proves entirely correct, one fact remains clear. Fear and dreaming are deeply connected, and both become more powerful during darkness. As generations passed, ancient humans accumulated countless experiences involving dreams. Some dreams appeared prophetic, others appeared meaningless. Some were comforting, others terrifying. Patterns emerged, stories emerged, interpretations emerged. The human desire for explanation continued. Just as darkness inspired myths about unseen creatures, dreams inspired ideas about unseen worlds. Because the human mind cannot resist mystery. Give people an unanswered question and they will search for meaning. This tendency helped humanity survive. It encouraged investigation, learning, discovery, but it also produced legends, beliefs, superstitions. The darkness became fertile ground for all of them. As civilization developed, these patterns continued. Ancient cultures across the world assigned special significance to dreams. Kings consulted dream interpreters. Priests studied visions. Ordinary people discussed strange experiences during sleep. Despite vast cultural differences, a common theme appeared again and again. The nighttime mind seemed important, powerful, mysterious, and because night remained associated with uncertainty, dreams became part of humanity's broader relationship with darkness. Yet beneath all these stories and interpretations, the biological reality remained unchanged. The human brain was still operating according to ancient evolutionary principles. Protect survival, detect threats,
Anticipat danger.
reduce uncertainty whenever possible. Darkness challenged each of these goals. Dreams complicated them further. The result was a psychological landscape unlike anything experienced during daylight. A landscape filled with emotions, questions, possibilities. For thousands of generations, humans lived within that landscape. Every sunset reopened the mystery. Every sunrise temporarily closed it. Night after night, year after year, century after century, until eventually, the relationship between humans and darkness became one of the deepest relationships in our entire history. Not because darkness was evil, not because darkness was supernatural, but because darkness represented everything we could not fully know. And human beings have always struggled with the unknown. Even now, even in the age of science, even in a world illuminated by billions of electric lights, the unknown still attracts us. It still frightens us. It still inspires our imagination. And nowhere is the unknown more powerful than when visibility disappears and certainty fades. The darkness outside becomes quiet. The darkness inside becomes active. And the ancient story continues, because the fear of darkness was never simply about survival. It was also about consciousness itself. About what happens when humans encounter the limits of their understanding. And those limits would shape civilization in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. Civilization changed almost everything about human life, but it did not change the human brain nearly as much as people imagine. This is one of the most important ideas in understanding fear. When we look around the modern world, it feels completely disconnected from the world of our ancestors. Towering cities, electric lights, airplanes, computers, artificial intelligence, modern medicine. The differences are extraordinary. Yet beneath all of this innovation, the basic architecture of the human brain remains remarkably ancient. If a child from 50,000 years ago were somehow born today, that child would grow into a modern human. The same emotions, the same instincts, the same fundamental psychological systems. Those systems were not designed for skyscrapers. They were not designed for smartphones. They were not designed for apartment buildings illuminated by electric light. They were designed for survival in a prehistoric world. A world where darkness carried real consequences. This mismatch between ancient instincts and modern environments explains many curious aspects of human behavior. Consider something simple: walking through a forest during daylight. Most people feel relatively comfortable. Now imagine walking through that same forest at midnight. Nothing has changed except visibility. The trees are identical. The path is identical. The landscape is identical. Yet the emotional experience becomes completely different. Why? Because your brain is not responding solely to reality. It is responding to possibility. And darkness dramatically increases the number of possibilities. Could there be an animal nearby? Could there be another person nearby? Could there be danger ahead? The conscious mind may reject these possibilities. But the ancient survival systems notice them immediately. They prepare just in case. That preparation often feels like fear. In reality, it is caution, a survival mechanism refined over hundreds of thousands of years. Perhaps the clearest evidence of this ancient inheritance can be seen in children. Across cultures, across languages, across continents, many children experience fear of darkness at some point during development. This pattern appears so consistently that psychologists have studied it for decades. The exact reasons remain complex, but one thing is clear: children do not need to be taught that darkness is different. They often recognize it instinctively. The lights go out. Many fears feel more manageable in the presence of others. Companionship reduces uncertainty. Shared awareness creates security. This pattern may also have deep evolutionary roots. For our ancestors, groups increased the likelihood of surviving dangerous situations. The emotional comfort people derive from companionship may partly reflect this ancient reality. Darkness often reminds us of it, because darkness highlights vulnerability, and vulnerability encourages connection. Perhaps that is why some of humanity's oldest traditions involve gathering together after sunset, sharing stories, sharing meals, sharing experiences. The darkness brought people closer, not because it was friendly, but because facing uncertainty together was easier than facing it alone. In this way, darkness helped shape not only fear, but community, culture, relationships, the very foundations of human society. And yet, despite all these influences, the story of darkness contains one final mystery, a mystery hidden within modern science itself. Because even now, after centuries of research and technological progress, scientists continue discovering new details about how darkness affects the human brain. New insights, new questions, new puzzles. The deeper we look, the more fascinating the relationship becomes. And some of those discoveries suggest that the fear of darkness may be even older and even more deeply rooted than anyone once believed. For most of human history, darkness was not a choice. It arrived every evening whether people wanted it or not. No one could stop it. No one could delay it. No one could escape it. The sun disappeared. The world changed. And humanity adapted. Yet something remarkable happened during the last few hundred years. For the first time in our species' existence, darkness began losing its power. First came better lamps, then gaslight, then electricity. One by one, the ancient barriers imposed by night began to disappear. Entire cities remained awake after sunset. Factories operated through the night. Roads became illuminated. Homes glowed with artificial light. For the first time, humans gained the ability to transform night into something resembling day. It was a revolutionary achievement. And yet, despite all these advances, darkness never completely surrendered its influence over the human mind. Scientists have discovered something fascinating. Even when people live in brightly lit environments, the brain still responds differently at night. Because darkness affects more than vision, it affects biology itself. Deep inside the human body exists a timing system, an internal clock, a mechanism that evolved over millions of years. Long before modern civilization, long before humanity itself, this system helps regulate sleep, hormones, alertness, energy levels, countless biological processes, and one of its most important signals is light. When daylight fades, changes begin occurring throughout the body. The brain starts preparing for rest, hormones shift, awareness changes, behavior changes. Darkness does not merely surround us, it influences us from within. This relationship is ancient, far older than our species. For millions of years, life on Earth evolved according to cycles of light and darkness. Every organism adapted, plants, animals,
Humanos.
the rhythm became embedded within biology itself. This may help explain why darkness continues to feel significant even in modern environments. The connection is deeper than culture, deeper than history. It reaches into the foundations of life itself. Imagine one of our distant ancestors sitting beside a fire 40,000 years ago. The stars stretch endlessly overhead. The flames flicker. The wilderness waits beyond sight. That ancestor knows nothing about neuroscience, nothing about hormones, nothing about circadian rhythms. Yet their body is already responding to darkness. Their biology is following patterns established long before humans existed. And those same patterns continue operating inside you tonight, right now. As evening approaches, countless processes begin changing inside your body. You do not notice most of them, but they are there, silent, automatic, ancient. The darkness activates systems that have guided human behavior for hundreds of thousands of years. This realization leads to an extraordinary conclusion. The fear of darkness is not merely a psychological phenomenon. It is part of a much larger relationship. A relationship between humans and the natural world. A relationship shaped by evolution, biology, survival, and time. For our ancestors, darkness represented vulnerability. For modern humans, darkness often represents uncertainty. But beneath both experiences lies the same ancient foundation. The need to survive, the need to understand, the need to anticipate what comes next. Throughout history, darkness challenged all three. It limited knowledge, reduced awareness, forced caution, and because it did so consistently for hundreds of thousands of years, it left a permanent mark on the human mind. That mark still exists, not as a memory, not as a conscious thought, but as a tendency, a subtle influence, a quiet whisper from the distant past. Scientists sometimes refer to these inherited tendencies as evolutionary adaptations, traits shaped by natural selection because they improved survival. Fear itself is one such adaptation. Without fear, our ancestors would have taken unnecessary risks. Without fear, caution would disappear. Without fear, humanity might never have survived long enough to build civilization. Fear protected us, especially at night. The irony is that many people view fear as a weakness, yet fear helped create everything around us. Every city, every invention, every culture, every generation. Because before humans could thrive, they first had to survive. And survival required respecting danger. The darkness taught that lesson repeatedly, generation after generation, century after century, millennium after millennium, until caution became part of human nature. Even now, in a world transformed by technology, traces of those lessons remain visible. A child reaches for a nightlight. An adult checks a dark hallway. A traveler feels uneasy on an isolated road after sunset. These reactions are not signs of irrationality. They are reminders of where we came from, reminders that our minds were shaped in environments very different from the ones we inhabit today. And perhaps that is the most fascinating aspect of all. The darkness allows us to glimpse our own history, not through books, not through archaeology, but through emotion. When darkness makes us alert, we are experiencing something our ancestors experienced. When uncertainty creates caution, we are sharing a response shaped over countless generations. For a brief moment, the modern world fades, and the ancient world becomes visible again. Not outside us, inside us. The same instincts that once helped humans survive predators still operate. The same nervous systems, the same emotional pathways, the same ancient warnings, all carried forward through time, across thousands of generations, across continents, across civilizations, until they reached us tonight. And perhaps that is why darkness continues to fascinate humanity. Not because it hides monsters, not because it contains supernatural forces, but because it reminds us of something we rarely consider. How much of ourselves was shaped long before history began. The darkness is a connection to that forgotten past, a doorway into the experiences of ancestors whose names we will never know, people who lived and died beneath the stars, people who survived because they listened carefully when night arrived, people whose fears became our fears, whose instincts became our instincts, whose survival became our inheritance. So tonight, when you switch off the lights, when your room becomes quiet, when the familiar world begins to fade into shadow, remember this: the feeling that follows is ancient, far older than civilization, far older than writing, far older than memory, comes from a world where darkness truly mattered, a world that shaped every human being alive today. The darkness itself is not what your brain fears. What it fears is uncertainty, the possibility of unseen danger, the loss of information, the unknown. And for more than 300,000 years, those fears helped humanity survive. That is why darkness still feels different. That is why your attention sharpens when visibility disappears. That is why the night continues to hold power over the human imagination. Because somewhere deep within your mind, a small part of you is still standing beside an ancient campfire, watching the edge of the light, listening to the sounds beyond sight, and waiting for the sunrise, the same way your ancestors once did. 300,000 years ago,